Let me preface this by saying I'm not crazy. I know how this is going to sound. Paranoid, unhinged, delusional, but I swear everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. It started with a face, or more accurately, faces that all looked just slightly off. 3 months ago, I ended a relationship with my ex Caleb. We'd been together almost 2 years, and the breakup was long overdue. Caleb wasn't violent or anything, he never hit me, but he was controlling and possessive in that low-key and calculating kind of way. Perhaps the worst kind of way. He'd do things like track when I'm on my phone and quiz me on things I'd done that day to see if I'd give the same answer twice. After I left him, I changed my number, disabled my social media, and even moved apartments. I thought I was in the clear. Then came the barista. It was a Tuesday morning. I stopped by this little hole-in-the-wall coffee shop near my new place. I'd only been there once or twice. As I stepped up to the counter, the barista, a girl about my age, smiled at me, but something about her expression made me pause. She tilted her head and said, "Good morning, sunshine." I froze because that was Caleb's nickname for me. It was not a common one. He used to say it sarcastically whenever I was upset, like, "What's wrong, sunshine?" He enjoyed pushing buttons. I brushed it off, maybe it was a coincidence, but then it happened again. A few days later, I took a rideshare to work. A different driver than usual, older guy, maybe in his 50s. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror like he was trying to recognize me, and then he asked me if I ever figured out what I was running from. He said it as casual as could be. I simply responded, "What?" And he just chuckled and shook his head like I was in on some joke. Caleb said that to me once. After I told him I needed time to figure myself out, he leaned in, dead serious, and asked, "Ever figure out what you're running from?" Now, 2 strangers have repeated things he said, word for word. It kept happening. A woman at the grocery store bumped into me and whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A guy on the street said, "Still wearing your hair like that," as he passed. Another one, someone who worked in my building, said, "You always liked this song," while humming the exact tune Caleb used to play when we argued. It wasn't their faces that freaked me out, it was the way they looked at me. Like they knew me, or at least thought they did. They all had different faces, but their eyes all had the same expressions. I started thinking I was going crazy. I mean, what else could explain it? So I did something I wasn't proud of. I contacted Caleb. Not directly. I sent a message to his sister. I told her to tell him to stop. I figured maybe he hired a private investigator. Maybe he was stalking me or pulling strings, telling people things about me. I just wanted it to stop. She texted back the next day, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. Caleb's in rehab. He's been there for 6 weeks with no phone." I didn't believe her. I thought she was covering for him. That is, until I saw a picture she posted of him on Facebook a week later, looking pale and sunken in, holding one of those one-day sober chips. So it couldn't be Caleb, or at least not directly. I couldn't shake the feeling that these strangers knew things they shouldn't, though. One night, I stayed late at work. I didn't want to go home because my apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Not that anything bad happened inside of it, I just didn't like being alone. Around 10 p.m., I finally called it a night. I walked the 10 minutes to my place, keeping my head down, headphones in, but no music playing. Something I learned to do so I could still hear if someone was following me. When I turned the corner onto my block, I saw someone sitting on the stoop of the building across from mine. A young man with his hoodie up but his head down. I almost ignored him until he spoke. He said, "Cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" I stopped walking. He didn't look at me, he just stared at the sidewalk like he was reading something on it. I slowly walked past and didn't say a word. When I reached my building, I went upstairs and locked every bolt on the door. I sat on the couch for hours, just listening to nothing. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to find my doormat flipped over. That might not sound like a big deal, but I live alone, and the door to my unit is on the top floor. You don't just accidentally walk by my place. The underside of my mat had something scribbled in pen. It said, "You can change your face too if you want, but I'll still recognize you." I didn't know what it meant, but I still threw up. That day, I booked a hotel for the weekend. I left my apartment without packing anything. I didn't feel safe even grabbing clothes, I just needed to be somewhere crowded. The hotel clerk gave me a room on the 4th floor. It was small, quiet, and kind of stuffy, but it felt safe. But only until around 2 a.m., when someone knocked on my door. There were 3 slow knocks. I sat up in bed and waited. They knocked again eventually. I peeked through the peephole, and it was a woman, maybe in her 40s. Her face was totally blank and expressionless. She was just staring straight at the door. She didn't say anything, so I didn't make a sound, and eventually she left. It was one of the most disturbing things I'd ever seen. The next morning, I asked the front desk if someone had come by to my room. They said no one should have been up there, especially that late. All the rooms on my floor were vacant. That's when it clicked. These weren't random people. They were being sent and fed my details. They were given phrases Caleb used. But if it weren't Caleb, who would do it? And why? I thought about Caleb in rehab, about his obsession with control and making sure I was never fully gone. He didn't need to be the one knocking, he just needed to send others to do it. So I started digging, and there was one conversation I remembered from months before the breakup. Caleb talking about a forum he was on, a place where people shared tactics. He made it sound like it was for productivity or self-improvement. I don't remember the name of it. Honestly, I don't think he ever gave me the name. But in retrospect, it sounded like some creepy, cultish roleplay crap, except it's happening to me for real. Someone, probably Caleb, had hired people to say his words and mimic his patterns, so that even if he was out of my life technically, I'd still be constantly reminded of him. It wasn't stalking in the traditional sense. It was psychological graffiti. Like he was spraying himself onto strangers so I could never be sure who I was looking at. I don't think it's about watching me, but rather about making sure I never stop watching for him. I moved again and disappeared off social media again. I even dyed my hair. I told friends not to tell anyone where I was. It worked until last week. I was walking home from the bookstore and a woman passed me on the street and said, "Still hiding behind books, Sunshine?" She didn't stop walking even just to look at me. I don't think this will ever stop. Maybe he paid some crazy underground service to do this to me for a year, who knows? Maybe he made it public. Maybe this is some sick underground game now. Who can scare Sunshine the best? Who can get the closest without touching? I can't trust anyone's face anymore. The constant paranoia is truly eating away at my mental health.